Great. Well, let's move on into market research and planning. So on the slide, you see where we've talked about looking at the government as far as research, open source, gaining access to industry databases. There's a lot of different points here that everyone has kind of contributed to. But let's just open the panel up. I had somebody ask me in the first section, what's an Exhibit 53? There are a lot of people out there who don't know the nuances of government and all sort of the some of the different things that are out there. So let's start at a very basic level. What do people need to do to start market research? Go ahead, Mark.
The government agency websites, this is Mark Amtower. The government agency websites are information rich. Start with a specific agency. If you think you have something that they want, ferret through every aspect of their website that you can find. You'll find contacts, you'll find contracts, you'll find preferred contractual vehicles, missions. You'll find the OMB 53s and 300s. These are filings each agency has to make every year.
Prime contractors.
Forecasts.
Agency forecast. There's an OSDBU list there, and there's a Freedom of Information page on every government agency website. It's free.
Yeah, I mean, and going on with that, I mean, the agency website is always a good place to start, just because, if you've got in mind a product or a solution you want to take to a government agency, obviously you were building it around a particular purpose, and it's going to either fall into a particular vertical like healthcare or law enforcement or DoD or something like that. So once you identify who those organizations are, go visit their website and then figure out what part of the organization is most germane to you, or vice versa, which your product or solution is most relevant to. And then once you understand what part of the organization you want to reach out to, there are one-offs from that. If you're going to deal with the acquisition part of the house, or the CIO part of the house, or the human capital side of the house, well, all these C-levels have their councils that are out there. So you've got the Chief Human Capital Officers Council and the CIO Council and so forth, where they all get together and have their shindigs and talk about what's going on in government at their level to make decisions that ultimately will affect all the government agencies. And so if you follow the ball from what they're doing in those areas, you'll understand potentially what's coming down the line for you as far as requirements or changing needs.
And I'd like to back up just a step, though. If you don't know what agency to target first, what you might want to take a look at is another government website, which is the Federal Procurement Data System, Next Generation, FPDS.gov. And you can run reports that are fairly easy to access that will tell you what agencies are purchasing related to what you're selling. So you'll be able to identify, is it Department of Defense, is it a civilian agency, all the way through their individual departments. And then you can start looking at the individual agencies' websites.
Actually, dovetailing on that real quickly, for those folks like me that aren't SQL engineers, because FPDS, the original one, just was so rough. The government issued USAspending.gov a couple of years back, which is for the people like me that aren't so smart. You can go in there and use a very simple GUI and pull information out, and it gives you a lot of that same information in a much simpler format. But USA Spending will do it. You can put in one keyword under a project description or something like that and pull out just a wealth of information about who's buying what, during what fiscal year, during what NAICS code, PSC code, who they bought it from. I mean, it's incredible.
The only thing I've found with USA Spending, sad to say, is you can get two different results within 20 seconds of each other of the same search.
And USA Spending is actually not updated because it's extracted from FPDS.
Yeah. So
there is a delay there, but yeah, there's some anomalies there, especially with the new subcontracting piece too.
Mm-hmm. Well, and not to denigrate anything that you can get on the web, and all those websites are great in terms of information. But the huge caveat is, anything that we're talking about, everybody else can go there too.
Absolutely.
The importance of relationships and building relationships internally is to get information before it becomes public information, to learn how an RFP is going to be shaped, to be part of the shaping, to do everything you can before a procurement because you want to be the chosen selected vendor.
Hillary, I'm so glad you said that, because I believe most people use market research the wrong way. They go through this effort, look at the agencies, look at what they're buying, and out of market research comes a laundry list of procurement opportunities spread out over a 5-year horizon. And they think that's the end of the journey. That's the market research that they see is much like the tip of an iceberg. It shows places where your company should have a dialogue, where you should have a relationship, because 9/10 of that iceberg is not visible to the market research community. It's what you learn when you get in there that produces the business,
Yes,
not the
exactly.
tip.
It's about creating that dialogue and that relationship. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, can I add to, I think finding and doing the research is good, but as a business owner or a business leader, do we do the follow-on research to make sure there's a business case
Right.
for pursuing this business? I mean, are the margins there in the government space to go sell our product or service? We'll find tons of opportunities if we do the research, I promise. Opportunities are there, but does it fit our business model, and can we make money? And if we can't, what are we doing?
In fact, we have a poll open right now about what people need to do to most improve their business development process. And so go ahead, chime into that poll. But right now, a lot of you are saying it's about data on business opportunities and then business case. And that's sort of the two
Hey, Mike,
answers. Go ahead.
it's Jimmy. I wanted to chime in as well on this. For everyone listening, grab a piece of paper, get a pencil, write this down. We'll repeat it twice. This is also critical when you're going in the market. And all the data you're getting from my colleagues on the panel is awesome. You should, in addition to doing that, you should do this as well. Go out to www.gov/e-gov/docs. Where that's going to take you is to where a lot of the budgets are. As I mentioned, I specialize more in the technology. And one of the things that's really critical for y'all getting your understanding for 2012 where to go is that the federal IT budget is $81.2 billion for this current fiscal year. About $25 billion is DME or new money. What I would recommend, this is a spreadsheet, Microsoft Excel. It's over 6,000 line items. Pick your two agencies. You can use the Control F feature, Command and Find. Make a list of y'all's keywords that your company does, and it will literally take you to the descriptions of what's going on in those accounts. It's one of the better places to really start looking at the federal IT budget.
And this is Jim McCarthy. Another trick of the trade, which I'll put forth, and there'll be no extra charge for this little secret, by the way. But
Just speak up.
I'll use the word rear view mirror. And a lot of companies do their market research about looking what's coming out in now or in the future. And one of the little tricks that we learned some time ago was actually to go back to contracts that were awarded 4 or 5 years ago and look which ones are expiring. And you might even be ahead of the curve at that point. And of course, there are obviously some very good industry databases, and we could mention one that happens to be associated with this. Everybody knows that that's the best one. And in any case, if you use that properly, you can identify contracts that are expiring before most people have ever even turned their attention to it. Now, not every one is going to be extended. Some will be canceled or the options will be taken. But nevertheless, if you have a list of the 10 contracts in your area that are going to expire in a year or something like that, think about how far you could get out in advance if you do that kind of research.
There's another tool out there on what Jimmy was talking about from the O&B standpoint. We direct a lot of people to. If you're on the services side of the business, under the FAIR Act, there was a requirement that O&B put out for agencies to publish what's called a services contract inventory. And that is an inventory of basically every active service-based contract in their arsenal at that time. And you can pull this up, and they're mostly in an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF format, and you can get it off the O&B website. And basically, every contract with a PSC code, DUNS number, award amount, start date, end date, description across the board, who the agency was, is listed right there. And so, review mirror, there you go. For all the agencies on the services side, you've got every live contract from here and there.
And just so people know, when we finish this event, in the slides, we're going to have a resource section after the Q&A slide, and we'll put these URLs that everyone's recommending, because I'm getting a lot of requests for people to repeat the website URLs again, and it's just going to take us a little too long to sit through and go through www this, and this. So when it comes to the research, we've talked a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about the planning process, the business development process that people have to go through. What are some of the areas where people can get started at? What? You guys are all laughing.
Just getting Bob ready to go.
Well, I was actually looking to you, Guy, because you talked last time about simplified acquisitions. I mean, there's so many different. When we talked earlier about don't just shoot for the big piece, that $1.5 billion contract. There are a lot of things out there that are simple things that you should be targeting when you kind of get started to keep the lights on, keep things moving.
Absolutely. Well, no, and everyone knows this is my my bully pulpit, from the standpoint of trying to get folks an understanding of developing those relationships and getting an understanding of how government agencies are doing their acquisitions. Years ago, when I was a inside guy, my first chance selling on the GSA schedule for a little company called Pulsar Data Systems, all my accounts were out west. And I was working with the Air Force and the Navy out there, and I was working with a couple customers that started giving me their credit card numbers. They were called impact numbers at the time before they became SmartPay. And ultimately, I did a bunch of these orders over about a year period with this customer, 1,500 there, 2,500 there, then some simplified acquisitions that were 10 or 15,000. And after about a year, apparently they had enough confidence in me to throw a big one my way, and it ended up being my first major project, about $2 million worth of business on the FA-18, building their electronic classrooms. And so I talk about simplified acquisitions a lot because the government has it written up in the FAR. It is a program that favors small business. It is a program that is meant to benefit government and industry from streamlining the acquisition process. And a lot of folks have not looked at it seriously because up until the beginning of last fiscal year, the threshold was $100,000 per transaction. Well, they changed to $150,000 this year. And one of the things that I thought had gone away, but apparently it did not, was a special exception under this for commercial items. It was a test program under FAR 13.5 that allows the government to use streamlined acquisition procedures to purchase up to $6.5 million at a pop. And again, it's for commercial items. Well, to that end, the government awarded 670,000 contract actions last year, total about $12.14 billion now, where 50% of that went to small business. And those are much easier to get walking in the door than going after the major, F-35 program. This is something you can walk in the door, and they may give you a $5,000 or $10,000 gap analysis contract to test the waters with you and see how much they like it. So it's a place to start.
As you do your planning, keep in mind, for those of you who are not in the government market, we saw a lot of people in the surveys that are in that situation. It's not a market for tourists. They're going to fly into town, meet a few people, hand out some brochures, and go home with a check. It is an urban legend. That flat doesn't happen. What it takes is a persistent presence and a deep understanding of those markets that you're going to serve. So as architects of a planning process, begin by saying we're going to make a major multi-year commitment, we're going to fund it, we're going to resource it, and we're going to be here, and failure is not an alternative. And plan it that way.
Yeah, and I would add to what Bob just said and say it's also an urban legend that you have to be in DC and you have to have a presence here. Actually, what is under targeted are the procurement centers at military bases. There's 35 or 6 military bases around the U.S. where there are procurement officers at those bases, different relationships, different states. That's one. And the second point I would have to that would be the federal government works one way, and there's commercial and civilian. Both of them work completely different. And anybody who's been in one of the armed forces, really, it's to your benefit to work with somebody that's been, because they are like fraternities. Yep. And so it's just worth your while to work with somebody, particularly, the Coast Guard is renowned for that, but all of them have their separate personalities, their separate biases. So one size does not fit all. Just because you can go in with one solution, you can't go into the other agencies. And my last point on that is, civilian, there are cutbacks across every single government agency, but IT spend is increasing by 8%. But just because you have an IT solution, you are late to the party. And I don't want to make this panel negative, but anybody that's listening on the phone that thinks now they have an IT solution and they're going to come to this, the entire US and foreign countries have thought, because there's an 8% increase in IT spend, let's go to the federal government. And if you're not, I would actually tell you, if you're not in there now, you might as well not bother. My very last point on that is that you need to look at also, we've all talked about market research, what to bid. You need to look at what not to bid. If you lose, two things definitely happen. One, time is money. You spend a lot of time, which is money, you've lost by losing. But secondly, you begin to get a negative brand in an agency if you keep bidding and you keep losing.
Well,
Gloria,
And one-
I know you want to jump in.
One of the other areas that we really haven't talked about at all in developing market process in the federal government is taking a multi-prong approach, not just focusing on the agencies themselves, but also focusing on prime contractors
Absolutely.
and teaming relationships. Because all three of those strategies are critical to success in the federal marketplace today.
And you have more of a chance of getting into something if somebody already has a relationship and you're piggybacking on
Right.
partnering. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we all know about the whole world of large size contracts. They're not called bundled contracts anymore because that's a bad word. Now consolidated, I think, is the politically correct word to use. But we're seeing billion-dollar contracts that are set aside for small business.
Yep.
It almost doesn't make sense,
Oxymoron.
but it is happening. So these large contracts are mandatory today, no matter what size business, what industry. So teaming is a critical aspect of business development today.
Sure.
Well,
We'll get
yeah.
more into teaming later, but
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
was going
I
to
know
add one
Mark,
last
you
thing,
wanna-
though, and this just has to do with one of the things I hear from a lot of folks that are coming in, based here from out of town, what have you, and it's kind of dovetails off what Hillary was saying. These companies come in, and the first thing they want to do is say, well, we're going to go after the low-hanging fruit. Okay? and I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh when I hear that, because if there is low-hanging fruit, AOC Key Solutions or any of the clients, everybody else sitting at this table, have gotten that low-hanging fruit.
Right.
Is what it comes down to. We have sent them out there to get that business already. And so it's just, I got to put it out there. There is no low-hanging fruit. It doesn't exist. Or if it does, these companies already have it.
Yeah, the low-hanging fruit syndrome does not exist. I want to touch on something that Bob sort of mentioned as well, and I should have touched on this in the market entry side. I'm advising right now a non-U.S. based company, major U.S. presence, huge international brand, but it's like the fourth time I've advised them. They're doing what I call the manufacturer hokey pokey. We'll stick our toe in, right toe in, right toe out, left toe in, left toe. Should we do the channel? We'll do the channel for a week, a month, maybe a year. They have some tremendous products, but not a flippin' clue about what it's going to take corporate-wise, and we have to get decisions from overseas. Ooh, what a joy! Before the guys in the U.S. can buy more toilet paper, much less move into the government market yet again. So if you're going to touch, like Bob said, come in occasionally, don't bother. You're not going to win.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Jim McCarthy again. I make my living as a consultant, and if we're not in the process of complicating the simple, then we're searching and scratching for the next billable hour. I know that. But what I'm going to tell you is, I'm going to do the opposite for just a second and maybe demystify something that we all try to make complex. But in my mind, the secret to marketing your business is very simple. It just comes down to this. Find a client need that is important and then meet it. That's it. That's really the essence of what all this is about, is serving a customer's need.
I would actually just take that and sort of refine it a bit. I was just, I mentioned to the team, I did a lot of work with Kinetic, and we had an offsite, and they were talking about the fact that the government really wants, bubbles and shiny things and bubbles and exciting things. And I would actually always say, everybody needs to eat. Everyone on the phone needs to eat. We all need to eat. You can eat pureed turnips, okay? It's not a question so much of needs as want. What do they want? Because, I mean, people want to eat Morton's, so they'll drive miles to Morton's, they'll overpay for a steak you can have at home. They want a certain experience and they want a certain thing. So I would say there are needs, yes, and I would go to what do they really want? What is it that makes their hot button? What is going to make them tick? Because everybody else can determine their needs. What do they really want?
Any closing thoughts? Because the next section we're going to deal with is marketing.
Yeah, Mike, I would just say, this is Jimmy from California, and one of my better bosses always made me put over my desk a sign, and where am I in the sales process? If you just go simple Dale Carnegie, attention, interest, conviction, desire, and close, they all take place in the market, but know where you are, and don't drink your own Kool-Aid, don't fool yourself, and always know where you are in moving something forward. And a lot of times too, and forgive me, I'm not there to see everyone first, but the gentleman who said it's simple, meet a need. Well, know where you are in that process of meeting it, and always be mindful of what your next steps are to move things forward.
Right. Any other closing thoughts? And then we're going to move on to marketing. All right. So marketing.